Hey everyone. Tonight I have 5 terrifying stories that took place on highways, those long, isolated stretches of road where help can be miles away and anything can happen. Highways are supposed to be straightforward. You get in your car, drive from point A to point B, and arrive safely. But sometimes something goes wrong. You break down in the middle of nowhere. You take a wrong turn, or you encounter someone or something that turns a routine drive into a nightmare you'll never forget. These 5 stories will make you think twice before driving alone at night. Let's begin. Story 1: The Rest Stop. This first story comes from a truck driver named Frank, who was driving through rural Montana on Interstate 90 late at night. Frank had been a long-haul trucker for over 15 years. He'd driven every major highway in America and was used to the long, lonely nights on the road. It was around 2 a.m., and Frank had been driving for 6 hours straight. He needed to take a mandatory break, so when he saw a rest stop sign, he decided to pull over. The rest stop was small and dimly lit, just a parking area, a couple of picnic tables, and a restroom building. Frank's truck was the only vehicle there. He parked, grabbed his thermos of coffee, and stepped out to stretch his legs. The night was quiet. No traffic on the highway, no sounds except the wind rustling through the trees. Frank walked over to the restroom building. The men's room door was propped open slightly. He pushed it open and stepped inside. The lights were flickering. One of the fluorescent bulbs was going out, casting the room in stuttering light. Frank used the restroom quickly, washed his hands, and turned to leave. That's when he noticed something. On the mirror, written in what looked like condensation or soap, were words: "Don't stop here." Frank's stomach tightened. The writing was fresh. The edges of the letters were still wet. Someone had written this recently. Frank quickly walked out of the restroom and looked around the rest stop. Still no other vehicles, no one in sight. Frank got a bad feeling. He walked back to his truck, keeping his eyes on the surrounding area. As he reached for his door handle, he heard something. A voice coming from the trees beyond the rest stop. "Help me!" Frank froze. "Please help!" It sounded like a woman in distress. Frank's instincts were screaming at him. Something was wrong. "Where are you?" Frank called out, not moving from his truck. "In the woods, please." Frank pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it toward the trees. He couldn't see anyone. "I'm calling the police," Frank said loudly. "Stay where you are." Frank climbed into his truck and locked the doors. He called 911 and reported what he'd heard. The dispatcher told him to stay in his vehicle and that officers were on their way. Frank sat in his truck, watching the tree line. About 5 minutes later, he saw movement. Not from the woods, but from underneath Frank's truck. Someone crawled out from underneath Frank's truck. A man, tall, wearing dark clothes. Frank's heart was pounding. The man stood up and looked directly at Frank through the windshield. He smiled, and then he ran, not into the woods, but toward the restroom building. Frank laid on his horn, trying to scare the man away. The man disappeared, around the side of the building. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they searched the entire rest stop. They found evidence that someone had been living in the woods nearby. A campsite with stolen items, license plates, personal belongings, a knife, but no sign of the man Frank had seen. The police told Frank something that made his blood run cold. Over the past year, there had been 3 attacks at that rest stop, all late at night, all involving someone hiding under parked vehicles, waiting for drivers to return. 2 drivers had been robbed. One had been stabbed and left for dead. He survived, but was permanently injured. Frank was the first person to call the police before getting attacked. The warning on the mirror had saved him. But Frank still wonders, who wrote that warning? And where are they now? Story 2. The Wrong Exit. This story comes from a woman named Lisa, who was driving home from a business trip on a highway in rural Arkansas. Lisa had been on the road for about 4 hours and was getting tired. It was around 11 p.m. and the highway was mostly empty. She saw a sign for a gas station at the next exit and decided to stop for coffee and to stretch her legs. Lisa took the exit and followed the signs toward the gas station. But after driving for about 2 miles, she realized something was wrong. There was no gas station. The road had turned from pavement to gravel, and she was now driving through dense woods with no lights anywhere. Lisa checked her GPS. It showed she was in the middle of nowhere near the highway. "What the hell?" Lisa muttered. She tried to turn around, but the road was narrow, with ditches on both sides. Lisa kept driving, looking for a place to safely turn around. After another mile, she saw something ahead. A building, old and dilapidated, with broken windows and a collapsed roof. It looked abandoned. Lisa slowed down as she passed it. That's when she saw the cars. 4 or 5 vehicles parked behind the building. They looked old, covered in rust and dirt, like they'd been there for years. Lisa's stomach dropped. She sped up, desperate to find a way back to the highway. The gravel road suddenly opened into a clearing, and in the middle of the clearing were people, maybe a dozen of them, standing in a circle around a fire. They all turned to look at Lisa's car as she drove past. Lisa's heart was racing. She floored the gas pedal, her car fishtailing on the gravel. Behind her, she could see some of the people running toward their vehicles. Headlights turned on. They were following her. Lisa was panicking now. She had no idea where she was or how to get back to the highway. Her GPS kept recalculating, trying to find a route. Lisa drove as fast as she could on the winding gravel road, the headlights behind her getting closer. Finally, after what felt like forever, she saw pavement ahead, a real road. She turned onto it and accelerated. The vehicles behind her followed for about a mile, then suddenly turned around and disappeared. Lisa kept driving until she saw signs for the highway. She got back on the interstate and didn't stop until she reached a well-lit, busy gas station 30 miles later. She was shaking so badly she could barely hold her coffee. Lisa called the police and reported what she'd seen. She gave them the approximate location of the exit and the abandoned building. The police investigated and found the exit Lisa had taken. But there was no gas station listed on that exit. Never had been. The sign she'd seen, the one that said gas station next exit, wasn't an official highway sign. Someone had put it there. The police followed the gravel road and found the abandoned building. And the cars. They ran the plates. 3 of the vehicles had been reported stolen over the past 2 years. but there was no sign of the people Lisa had seen. The police believe Lisa stumbled onto a chop shop operation. Criminals who steal cars, strip them for parts, and abandon the shells in remote locations. If Lisa had stopped or broken down on that road, there's no telling what would have happened. Lisa never drives alone at night anymore, and she double-checks every exit sign before leaving the highway, because she knows that sign was placed there deliberately to lure people off the highway into the woods where no one would hear them scream. Story 3: The Hitchhiker. This story comes from a man named Greg who picked up a hitchhiker on a desolate stretch of highway in Nevada. Greg was driving cross-country from California to Colorado and was on a long, empty section of highway through the Nevada desert. It was late afternoon, the sun setting behind the mountains, when Greg saw someone standing on the side of the road. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Please help." Greg normally didn't pick up hitchhikers, but something about the situation bothered him. They were in the middle of nowhere. The temperature was dropping. If he didn't help her, she might not survive the night. Greg pulled over. The woman walked up to the passenger window. She had long dark hair and was wearing jeans and a denim jacket. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice shaking. "My car broke down about 10 miles back. I've been walking for hours." "Where are you trying to get to?" Greg asked. "Anywhere with a phone. I just need to call someone to pick me up." Greg unlocked the door. "Get in. There's a town about 40 miles ahead." The woman climbed in, bringing a wave of cold air with her. They drove in silence for a few minutes. "I'm Greg, by the way." The woman didn't respond. Greg glanced at her. She was staring straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap. "What's your name?" Still no response. "Are you okay?" Greg asked. The woman slowly turned to look at him. Her eyes were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just solid black. Greg's blood ran cold. "You should have kept driving," the woman said, her voice no longer shaking. It was deep, guttural. Greg slammed on the brakes. The woman's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Her grip was impossibly strong, like a vice. "Let go!" Greg shouted, trying to pull away. The woman smiled, revealing teeth that looked wrong. Too many, too sharp. Greg reached for the door handle with his free hand and pulled it open. He threw himself out of the car, falling onto the pavement. The woman stepped out after him, still smiling. Greg scrambled to his feet and ran. He ran down the highway, not looking back, his heart pounding. After about 100 yards, Greg finally looked over his shoulder. The woman was gone. His car was still sitting in the middle of the road, doors open. Greg walked back cautiously. The car was empty. He got in, locked all the doors, and drove away as fast as he could. But as he drove, he noticed something in the rearview mirror. Scratches on the passenger seat. Deep scratches like claw marks gouged into the fabric. Greg drove straight through the night, not stopping until he reached Colorado. He sold the car 2 weeks later. He couldn't stand to be in it, because every time he got in, he could still smell it. Something sulfuric, rotten, like decay. And sometimes late at night, Greg wonders, what if he hadn't jumped out of the car? What if he'd kept driving? Where would that woman have taken him? Story 4: The Parallel Car. This story comes from a couple, Mike and Sarah, who were driving home from a weekend trip on Interstate 80 through Wyoming. It was around midnight, and the highway was almost completely empty. They'd been driving for hours and were exhausted, but wanted to push through to get home. Sarah was asleep in the passenger seat. Mike was driving, listening to music to stay awake. That's when he noticed the car. A sedan, maybe a quarter-mile behind him, matching his speed. Mike didn't think much of it at first. Plenty of people drive late at night. But after about 10 minutes, the car was still there. Same distance behind him, same speed. Mike changed lanes. The car changed lanes. Mike sped up slightly. The car sped up. Mike's unease grew. He slowed down, thinking the car would pass him. The car slowed down too. Mike glanced at Sarah. She was still asleep. He decided to test something. Mike took his speed down to 55 miles per hour, well below the speed limit. The car behind him slowed to 55 miles per hour. Mike accelerated to 80 miles per hour. The car accelerated to 80 miles per hour. Mike's heart was pounding now. "Sarah," he said, shaking her shoulder. "Wake up." "What? What's wrong?" "There's a car behind us. It's been following us for the past 20 minutes, matching everything I do." Sarah turned around and looked. The car was still there. Headlights steady, same distance. "Maybe they're just going the same direction," Sarah suggested. "For 20 minutes, matching my exact speed?" Mike had an idea. There was an exit coming up in 2 miles. "I'm going to take this exit. If they follow, we're calling the police." Mike put on his turn signal and took the exit. The car followed. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. Mike drove down the exit ramp and turned onto a small access road. The car followed. Mike pulled into a gas station parking lot. The car pulled in behind them and parked about 20 feet away. Mike and Sarah sat in their car, doors locked, staring at the vehicle behind them. The headlights stayed on, but no one got out. "I'm calling 911, Sarah said, pulling out her phone. As she dialed, the car behind them suddenly reversed, turned around, and drove away. "What the hell?" Mike said. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. Mike and Sarah explained what happened. The officers took a report and told them something disturbing. There had been multiple reports over the past few months of a vehicle following people on that stretch of highway. In one case, a single woman driving alone had been followed for over 50 miles. When she pulled into a police station parking lot, the car drove away. In another case, an elderly couple had been followed and run off the road. They survived, but their car was totaled. The other vehicle fled the scene. The police never identified the driver. Mike and Sarah got back on the highway and drove straight home, constantly checking the mirrors. The car never reappeared, but Mike still thinks about it. What was the person in that car planning? Were they waiting for Mike and Sarah to stop somewhere more remote? Somewhere without witnesses? Mike will never know. But he knows one thing. If they hadn't pulled into that gas station, if they'd kept driving on those empty back roads, things might have ended very differently.
Story 5. The Back Seat. This final story comes from a woman named Jennifer, who was driving home alone late at night on a highway in rural Texas. Jennifer had been visiting a friend in Austin and was driving back to her home in Dallas about a 3-hour drive. It was around 1 a.m., and Jennifer was tired but alert, listening to a podcast to stay awake. She'd been driving for about an hour when she noticed something in her rearview mirror. A car behind her, flashing its lights. High beams on, then off. On, then off. Jennifer frowned. What was this person doing? She changed lanes. The car changed lanes and continued flashing its lights. Jennifer started to get nervous. She sped up. The car sped up and kept flashing. Jennifer's heart was racing. Was this person trying to harass her? Road rage? She grabbed her phone and called 911. "There's someone following me, flashing their lights. I'm scared." The dispatcher told her to stay on the highway and drive to the nearest police station. "There's one about 15 miles ahead. I'm sending officers to meet you there." Jennifer accelerated, keeping her eyes on the car behind her. The flashing continued, frantic now. Jennifer's mind was racing. Should she pull over? Keep driving? What if this person was dangerous? Finally, after what felt like forever, Jennifer saw the police station ahead. She pulled into the parking lot, her hands shaking. The car behind her pulled in too. 2 police officers came out of the station. Jennifer jumped out of her car. "That car's been following me, flashing their lights." The driver of the other car stepped out. It was a man, probably in his 50s, looking shaken. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling. "I wasn't trying to scare you. I was trying to warn you." "Warn me about what?" Jennifer demanded. "There's someone in your back seat." Jennifer's blood turned to ice. The officers immediately drew their weapons and approached Jennifer's car. One of them opened the back door. And there, crouched on the floor behind the driver's seat, was a man. Hiding. Holding a knife. The officers pulled him out and handcuffed him. Jennifer collapsed against her car, shaking violently. The man who'd been following her, whose name was Robert, explained what happened. He'd been at the same gas station as Jennifer about an hour earlier. He'd seen a man approach Jennifer's car while she was inside paying for gas. The man had opened her back door and climbed in. Robert had tried to get Jennifer's attention at the gas station, but she'd driven away before he could. So he had followed her, flashing his lights, trying to warn her that someone was in her car. Every time Robert flashed his lights, the man in Jennifer's back seat would duck down. Jennifer had driven for over an hour with someone hiding behind her seat. The man in the back seat was identified as Curtis Hayes, a convicted felon with a history of assault and carjacking. He was arrested and charged with attempted kidnapping, possession of a weapon, and violating parole. Curtis refused to say what he'd been planning to do. But given his history, the police believed Jennifer was in serious danger. If Robert hadn't followed her, Curtis would have eventually made his move. On an empty highway, where no one could help her. Jennifer sent Robert a thank you card and a gift basket. He'd saved her life. But Jennifer still has nightmares about driving in the dark, feeling safe, while inches behind her, someone was waiting, watching, deciding when to strike. So, which story scared you the most? The truck driver at the rest stop with someone hiding under his truck? The woman who took the wrong exit and found something terrifying? The man who picked up a hitchhiker that wasn't human? The couple followed by a mysterious car? Or the woman who drove for an hour with someone hiding in her back seat? Let me know in the comments below. And the next time you're driving alone at night, check your back seat before you get in. Lock your doors immediately. Stay on major highways. And if something feels wrong, trust your instincts. Because sometimes the highway isn't just a road. It's a hunting ground. Thanks for watching. And as always, stay safe out there.